ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this episode of The Wrestling Realm. He is the one and only, the real Dwayne Allen. I am Mr. Main Event Brian Waters. Now, what we're going to do for the next couple of weeks, we're going to bring to you our top 5 favorite WrestleManias. And what we're going to do, we're going to dissect and go in match by match, play by play, and show you why this is our top 5 WrestleMania. So, I'm going to get this started.
Let's get it cracking.
Yeah, I lost the opening coin toss.
That's right, I won.
Yeah, so he decided to defer. So, number 5, Mr. Main Event brings to you this one.
Five. Special effects.
Yep, WrestleMania 8. Now, I know a lot of people out there saying, why WrestleMania 8? What was so good about WrestleMania 8? Just like the 92 Royal Rumble, this was a match full of star power. I mean, you really saw, at the time, the present, some might argue the past, and the future in the ring at the same time. Let's go through the card. Opening up with Shawn Michaels taking on, Shawn Michaels with the lovely, may she rest in peace, the late Sensational Sherry, coming down and going against Al Matador, who we know was Tito Santana. Now, when you watch this match, you see that he's got the same music, but it's her who's singing for him.
Yeah, that was his original theme music when she actually sang it first. Yeah, I remember Chris Jericho was always talking about how he thought it was funny how arrogant he was to actually have his manager singing his song about him. So, yeah. And
this goes to show you how, around this time, you know, he always talks about how she benefited his career.
Right.
Some of you could even say that she was what Vicky Guerrero is to Dolph Ziggler today.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and if you look at who she had before, that was like the $1 Million Man. I mean, who was at one point in time the very top heel in the company. And that's the direction Shawn Michaels was going. I mean, he was fresh out of breaking away from Marty Jannetty. You know, a year ago, WrestleMania 7, talking about him and Jannetty, they had an excellent tag match at WrestleMania. Now we see Shawn Michaels propel, taking that step to, as he would become definitely one of the top Intercontinental champions. But this is where it all starts. And then he also, during this time, was, you know, that guy who you just knew when you looked at him, you saw a star.
Absolutely. If you look at today's product now, you know, Shawn Michaels was that guy that was trying to break through. He was a smaller guy with excellent in-ring skills and was on the verge of breaking through that glass ceiling, which we hear about a lot. You look at a lot of guys, even today's product, like a Cody Rhodes or even a Dolph Ziggler, guys that are workhorses that are trying to break through. And being paired with someone like Sensational Sherry, like you say, in reference to Vicky Guerrero, it makes a lot of sense in comparison because, like you said, that she had been dealing with only main event guys previously, right. Not only the WWE, but even previous promotions she was involved in, including the AWA. Kudos to Pat Patterson for actually suggesting that he go along with her being his manager, and I think it definitely raised Shawn Michaels as a brand to a completely different level. So,
yeah, certainly. Now, you know, obviously Shawn Michaels definitely goes over in this match, and we know him as Mr. WrestleMania. WrestleMania 8 is where Mr. WrestleMania began.
Definitely.
And speaking of beginnings, we are in the early parts of this guy's amazing streak. I'm talking about The Undertaker. Next match, him taking on Jake the Snake Roberts.
Right.
Everybody knows who wins this match, just because of the mere fact I said The Undertaker. But the story behind these two, you had this guy who was tormenting people with snakes. Now, how do you torment a dead man? And I remember when they was in the funeral parlor, how he had stuck the Undertaker's arm inside the casket. And so, you know, growing up watching this WrestleMania, I was like, oh, wow. In the end, it was Undertaker hitting the tombstone right on the mat in the Hoosier Dome in Indiana. throwing Jake the Snake inside the ring, getting a 1, 2, 3.
I think the amazing part about The Undertaker is you see him doing the same thing, but in different ways as far as different genres. Like, in today's nowadays, when The Undertaker comes out, you hear the gong, the lights go out, he has a terrifying moment, the smoke comes, sometimes the druids, depending on where you looked at him, and The Undertaker comes, and he asserts this dominating presence that we all see, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny because you look back then, you see it on that age of WrestleMania, he was doing the same thing with different vignettes like he would do with the funeral parlor thing, how he would come out with the caskets. I remember at one point he locked Ultimate Warrior in the casket. So it's refreshing to see a consistent character throughout time, like The Undertaker, be able to reinvent himself, but sort of do the same thing, but in a different way for a different time and a different generation.
Yeah,
so
you said he locked the Ultimate Warrior. I remember, and it sounded like, if I remember this correctly, Ultimate Warrior was crying in that casket. And I remember when I watched it, I think I was about, it was about 4, 5, 6 years old, and I was like, no.
I was nervous because back then, you watching wrestling, that's all you do. Before we get older and begin to use our brains as far as this is concerned. But when you watching, I was like, wow. My brother was watching. I was watching all my cousins because my uncle had bought a tape of it, and we had saw it. And he was he passed out, and then we thought stuff like that was real. Along with the Papa Shango curse that he put on Ultimate Warrior, stuff like that you saw back then, that you see replicated today in a different setting, but even back then, The Undertaker was still going strong during the same time.
I'm glad you mentioned those two names, Ultimate Warrior and Papa Shango, because they're going to come up later in this.
Oh boy, is that
right? In one of the best Intercontinental title matches in the history of WrestleMania, Bret Hart taking on Roddy Piper, wrestling's future going against wrestling's past.
Right.
The promo, you have two baby faces going into this match. Now, to give a story behind this. Bret Hart loses his title right before Royal Rumble 92, and then he gets sick, so he doesn't get his immediate rematch. Piper goes to the Royal Rumble and defeats the Mountie. Then, he's walking around, he's a champion, and now Bret Hart gets his rematch, and they have this promo battle, and then Piper's talking about, and Helen, and she was in the sandwiches, and the sandwiches, and the sandwiches, and the sandwiches, and they're going back and forth, and it was, obviously, you talk Roddy Piper, people might argue that he wasn't the best in-ring worker, but the guy could entertain you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And to have them two going face-to-face, and for this match, incredible. Great ending. Bret Hart goes over in this match and becomes a 2-time Intercontinental Champion.
I mean, absolutely. You talking about one of the greatest Intercontinental Champions of all time in the Hot Rod, Roddy Piper, with another guy, another workhorse, another guy that you felt like who was a deserving IC title holder, which was Bret the Hitman Hart, and it's like the best thing about Bret Hart and what you appreciate about what he does in the ring, and which a lot of good veterans are able to do, and some not so much, but some are. When you can make somebody else in the ring look as good as you are, and you got a guy like Piper, or you got a guy like Bret Hart, who both do that in the ring. So it's like you have two people bringing something to the table. It's not one-sided, where some guys might have to make somebody in the match or make them look good in the match because they're not as good. But as far as the entertainment value, you had a pure wrestling technician versus an entertainer. You cared about the story as well.
Yep.
And it wasn't too overshadowing, but it was enough to say, okay, this is legit, and you got a really great match out of it. So you can't argue with that one.
Yeah, then, the show slows down. Now, what I remember about this WrestleMania,
The slow shows down.
I'm just sorry. It is what it is. You had Ray Combs from Family Feud. He was hosting that night. So those you marks out there that think hosting just came when The Rock came along in WrestleMania 27, do your homework. You had the Big Boss Man,
You marks.
Virgil, Sergeant Slaughter, and Hacksaw Jim Duggan taking on the Nasty Boys, the Repo Man, and the Mountie in a tag match. As you see, the match was only 6 minutes, so really is not worth talking about.
Space filler.
And that's what you have right there, a bunch of space fillers in this match.
So to get everybody on the card, no offense.
Then you had, in my opinion, the best match of the night.
Okay.
The match obviously stole the show. Should have been last on the card for the fact that it was for the WWE Championship. But regardless of what, it wasn't. We know why. And that's Macho Man Randy Savage taking on the Nature Boy Ric Flair.
Now, before you go into this, You know, the word went out. My mind's constantly spinning, always grinding. You know what it is.
Oh, without a doubt.
Question: what do you think this shows about the WWE product? Because a lot of the fans always discuss about the fact that how sometimes the WWE Championship or WWF Championship has not gone on last. Now this is, now we talk about it nowadays. You talk, oh, it's not the same. But if you see right here, WrestleMania 8, we see the same thing. You have Ric Flair, you have Macho Man, two people that have been always known as workhorses, and then but have been also been slighted, as some believe, in the WWF. Not necessarily Ric Flair in the NWA or WCW, but in the WWF, they felt like, okay, these guys should have got a lot more pizzazz than they did, but didn't. Why do you think that was? That at this time, besides the obvious fact, okay, Hogan was going on last. Besides that, yeah, I think did you have two other matches before this, before the main event? Why do you feel that this has that match went on so early, and why do you feel like that? How come these workhorses seem to not close the show, but instead go on somewhere in the middle or close to the end instead of actually finishing the show out?
Well, you said it best, the workhorses. And a lot of times with your workhorses, you don't close the show with your workhorses because you want to keep them hooked. You want if the workhorses give you a good match, it keeps you there, keeps you in your seat, so that when you're face of the company, your main eventers come along, then it's like, okay, we got a good match, now let's be entertained. Hence, WrestleMania 3, Savage and Steamboat. You know, they was obviously, that WWE, they knew, if you know, anybody, they had to know, if you're a wrestling fan, a diehard wrestling fan, you knew Savage and Steamboat was going to give you a good match. Me, I didn't, because I wasn't even a year old at the time. But you had to know they was going to take the show as far as the actual wrestling. Yeah, Hogan and Andre, that was what sold the tickets.
Right.
That's what brought people into the arena. But, you know, it's also a money thing, because Hogan, no matter what, was filling the arena up. He was bringing people, he was putting butts in the seats.
Right.
So, with that being said, if you make Hogan's match, if you put Hogan's match in this slot, and you put Savage and Flair in that slot, don't you think some people might start to walk out?
I mean, yeah, I guess, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, especially during that time, you know, where, like I said, Hulkamania was running wild, as, you know, we tend to say.
And we know in '92, he was slowing down, but still, it's WrestleMania.
True.
And it's Hulk Hogan. Come on now.
I'm sure he didn't work very hard throughout the entire year just to get through WrestleMania. And that's, you know.
No, because obviously, it was another movie time for him.
Right, naturally. So.
But yeah, now this Savage and Flair match though. What a match! What a story! And you remember, if you go back and you look at this, you'll see when Ric Flair is talking about, he has these pictures of Miss Elizabeth and woo! She's wearing nothing but a staple. And you see Mr. Perfect, who was, oh my gosh, he played his role so well when they did this. I mean, he was the perfect manager. You had Bobby Heenan, who was, everybody knows, was a huge advocate for Ric Flair in the booth with Gorilla Monsoon. So you had so many stories going into this match where, yeah, if you could have ended the night with this, but from a business standpoint and where the business was then, it wouldn't have happened. That's how come you see now John Cena, face of the company, doesn't have to end every WrestleMania. So when you look at this match, and then you have a babyface winning the match in a cheating fashion with Savage. He had a handful of tights. Look right there. And you see, I remember Perfect's promo. He says that. So it was a good match, I thought.
As a rising king of controversy, I will go on the record and say I think the WWE made a mistake.
Okay.
Because if you look at it, it was funny because if you look at taking it even all the way further back to the best of WrestleMania tapes they released 1 through 14, you don't see anything about anybody else on that card besides Shawn and El Matador, Tito Santana, and Ric Flair and Macho Man.
Not even Bret and Piper?
No, you don't see Bret Piper on there. You don't hear them talking. No, yes, you do. Because I remember the roll up, the finish.
Yeah,
you're right. You see that. You see Piper and Bret. You see Macho Man and Flair, and then you see Shawn and El Matador, I think they made a huge mistake.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it was a failure or they messed up or they didn't know what they're doing, but I think at the end of the day, I think they underestimated it because, are you serious? I don't even remember Hogan and Sid Vicious was the main event. Like, that's how, you know.
I'm going to tell you why I remember this one.
Because it was Hogan.
Well, no, yeah, that too. But because of the fact that I remember I had a tape of it,
Mm-hmm.
and when I got the tape, it only had the last 3 matches, and I kept watching the Hogan and Sid Vicious, or Sid Justice, whatever you want to call it, I kept watching that match over and over again. So, but I will, I'll get to that in the end. Then we had in a squash, no, I ain't gonna say a squash match. We had a young Tatanka, fresh out of USWA,
Mm-hmm.
taking on Ricky Martel, and Tatanka wins the match. Then you had an interesting match between the Natural Disasters,
Fat Boys,
going against Money Inc., which the tag titles were on the line, but we know titles can't change hands if it's not, through this count out. We also had the Road Warriors, who did a promo about they wanted the winners, and that was interesting. That was when they had Paul Ellering and, getting all those. That was when tag team was at its finest, because in the dark match you had the Bushwhackers going against the Beverly Brothers.
Yeah.
So tag teams had rank. Who was going to challenge Money Inc. for the titles next, which they would go on and have a great run. A lot of people forget about this tag team. Shouts out to Mike Knox of Perfect Plex Talk Radio and the Best Damn Show in Radio. He's doing his top 25 tag teams, and he even has Money Inc. in his top tag teams.
Right.
So, just something people need to think about. Then you have Owen Hart taking on Skinner. Now this is when Owen Hart, obviously this is not his first WrestleMania, but this is when he was wearing that jumpsuit.
That green and black and
and before at Royal Rumble, him and the Anvil, they was the New Heart Foundation, if you remember.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah,
he had that hat on.
Mm-hmm. But who would have thought 2 years later, Owen Hart would go ahead and you look at this, and you look at some of these names: Ric Flair, Roddy Piper, Undertaker, Jake Roberts, Shawn Michaels. Who would have thought just 2 years later, or Ricky Martel, 2 years later, that Owen Hart would be the top heel in the company?
It's so hard to predict these type of things, especially in the wrestling business, and depending on it's where careers go, looks change, stories change, politics. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it's when you look back at it, it's like, wow, this really was a star-studded WrestleMania.
Yeah, and now
back with Hall of Famers minus a few.
Yeah.
Sorry, Skinner.
And then you look at the main event. Hulk Hogan going against Sid Justice.
Only thing main event about this main event was Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, it had a good story. Now, Royal Rumble, obviously a lot of this goes back to Royal Rumble, so not trying to sound repetitive here, but you're talking about one of the best Royal Rumbles in the history, 92. That's just my opinion. You see Hogan and Sid Justice, they're amongst the final four.
Right.
Well, actually, I'm going to say the final three because that's what they were. Hogan gets eliminated and is booed. Is cheered for being eliminated.
Right.
And then he holds on to Sid Justice. That's when Flair comes out, does the elimination, and he's the new WWF champion.
Right.
Now, this match, originally, they had a little press conference. You watch me before the match, they show you the press conference. It was supposed to be Hogan was #1 contender, getting ready to face Ric Flair. That didn't happen, which we're going to touch on as soon as I finish with this. Somehow or another, you had Saturday night main event, and it was Hogan and Justice against, I want to say Flair and the Undertaker, or Flair and somebody. If when you're watching this, if you correct me if I don't correct it, go ahead and tweet at Wrestling Realm. You'll see that
2 W's.
You'll see that is Sid Justice actually leaves Hogan.
Right.
And that's what escalates the feud between the two.
Okay.
Takes us into this match, which was just slow, terrible.
Yawn.
Yeah, it was a yawn moment. Me being a huge fan of Hulk Hogan, Hulkamaniac, I would say this was his worst WrestleMania match. No fault of his own.
I think the best part of the match is when he came out and got the crowd riled up, but I think that's where it ends.
I'm gonna go further than that, because at the end of this match, Papa Shango comes out and starts beating up on Hogan. So it's, you know, Hogan and Justice. All of a sudden, nobody knows this guy's there.
Right.
The Ultimate Warrior comes out.
Right.
And the two, you know, they join forces and they celebrate. Show goes off. With that being said, one, Warrior and Shango, they was like, I mean, that was a good rivalry. It would have been nice if they would have built it where that match could have took place. Right. But, you know, Warrior had his issues. Naturally. Now, the point that everybody's wanting to know, Hogan and Flair. Okay. You'll see that everybody, when you watch a lot of these DVDs, folks, they say that Hogan and Flair did not, when they went to these house shows, there wasn't the crowd response. They were old. That people wanted. And, you know, Hogan's hair was right here. It started here, then it was getting back here. You know, and Flair wasn't fully flabby yet. Now, I'm going to ask you this, the real Dwayne Allen. Here we go. Do you take the risk, knowing what you done at your house shows, but for that big WrestleMania payday, do you make a Hogan and Flair match? Absolutely not. You wouldn't? Absolutely not. Okay. Because you can hype that match, but if that match goes funky, that can destroy your entire WrestleMania. You say, okay, Flair Hogan, people are expecting pizzazz. Now, based on what you've seen on the road in your house shows, you're like, okay, listen, you know, these guys ain't gonna be able to deliver. You feel me? That's the whole point of having house shows a lot of times. You know, they don't get televised, so you don't know, because you see how it works in the ring, and you know, you make judgments. So by the time it gets to TV, you figure out what you want to do. It would have been nice, you know, it would have been a nice build-up, but if those guys didn't deliver, we'd have been saying, oh, this is a whack WrestleMania. Or I think it would have destroyed the entire card. Okay. I think you can look at it and say, okay, this is a good WrestleMania because you didn't get what you want, but I guarantee if that was at the top of the card and those old farts couldn't deliver, you're going to be like, oh, that WrestleMania was whack, because you're expecting this ginormous, crazy WrestleMania match, you know, from two guys that you feel like really made the business, in all honesty. And if you don't get that, then what? Like I said, it's always a gamble, but anything you do, you got to do your research, you know, whether it's TV, whether it's movies, anything, you know, you got to do your audience-related research. And if you look at your research and you say something over and over again and saying, these guys are not giving what we think, right? Why do it? Why not give them a fresh matchup with Macho and Ric Flair and let them go out and hit a home run, then take a risk on, okay, we're going to make money at first, but then what happens afterwards? So, glad you said that. You know, I would disagree. I feel that you go ahead and give the match. And the reason is, I think they were smart enough to recover from their mistakes. What do you mean? Well, if you're right, say they go out there and they don't hit a home run. Okay. Hogan really is on his way out. All right. We know that. Hogan's on his way out after this WrestleMania. You still got SummerSlam. Macho Man's gonna be there. We act like Ric Flair stayed around that much longer after Hogan left. What was this, 92? Flair was around till... Actually, Flair stayed until right before the Royal Rumble in 93. That wasn't that much longer. Maybe in wrestling years, but... Wrestling, I mean, calendar-wise, is longer. Wrestling years is not, considering the amount of pay-per-views we had at the time. By the time Hogan got back to WCW, Flair was already back there, nice and comfortable. Yeah, but you also, you know, got WrestleMania 9 coming up, and Hogan came through there. True. By that time, yeah, you're right. Flair was, it seemed like he blinked his eye, he lost the match to Perfect. He's in WCW. But, I mean, like I said, you still got SummerSlam. Mind you, folks, this is before King of the Ring, this is before In Your House, this is before 12 pay-per-views that come between WrestleMania and SummerSlam. True. So, you look at that, and you see Hogan, you see Flair. I mean, you see Hogan, like I said, he's on his way out. Okay. Regardless of what he said, you know, movie deals are coming. Right. That's when you can recover with your Macho Man and your Ric Flair match. Hence, instead of them giving us that most boring match between that Ric Flair and Mr. Perfect, honestly, kind of had to save, because Macho Man, being as good as he was, may rest in peace, he really couldn't work the Ultimate Warrior twice. The match, nobody can work the Ultimate Warrior twice. The match at WrestleMania 7 between those two, if it's somebody else, that match is the best match, probably the best match in the history of WrestleMania, next to Savage and Steamboat, next to Undertaker, Shawn Michaels twice. But because of the Ultimate Warrior, Savage made Warrior look like $1 million. Now he did this in '91. It's kind of hard to do it a year and a half later. So if you put him and Savage, if you put Flair and Savage in a rematch, in the first time at SummerSlam, I think that's where you can recover from a business standpoint. But I do understand what you're saying.
Right.
Now, looking at that, you have Savage and you do lose. Now let me ask you this. This is what I meant to say. Flair and Hogan takes place, was it '94?
Okay.
WCW.
Okay.
Me personally, I didn't think that match was that bad. We finally get what we want to see, but now it's at the Rivalry Company. It's at Bash at the Beach. The lights are nowhere near as bright. One, because it's WCW, and two, because it's not WrestleMania. So now your Rivalry Company done stole what you could have made billions off of. They done made millions.
And it didn't work.
I mean, they had...
It worked initially, because it always, like I said, you put the names on the card, people are going to come. But you got to deal with the after effects. Okay, will this work? Will it last? How far can we go with this?
And you said it best, because they did it again in a career versus career... career versus career match. Hogan wins. Flair takes 6 months off. If they do it just once, it works.
At the end of the day, WWE goes big or goes home. They should have did it 10 years prior, then we wouldn't have had no issue.
10 years prior to WrestleMania?
WrestleMania, yes.
So
if this was done back in 1982 versus 1992, I think it would have been a different story.
Well, I see what you're saying.
With that being said,
if Flair's in WWE in 1982, I'm sorry, Hulkamania doesn't run wild.
That's true. Because
as good as Flair, there's no way that you can bury a guy that's that good.
No.
People might say well, if this wouldn't have, no, there's no way you could bury a guy that's good. Hence why people make me mad when they say Vince McMahon only take care of his stars. That was the case. Ric Flair doesn't win the '92 Royal Rumble. Chris Jericho doesn't win the 2001 Undisputed Championship at Vengeance.
Yeah, how do you explain that?
Booker T doesn't get another world title reign. So what? He was King Booker. He still wasn't a Vince McMahon creation. Vince McMahon had to break him down and rebuild him up again. I'm just saying.
Sting's biggest fear.
So, yeah. So with that being said, final thoughts. Like I said, WrestleMania 8. Yeah, number 5 for me. I enjoyed the match. I understood the stories behind it. There was some misses. Can't say there wasn't. But at the end of the day, the highly understood misses, and you still get a definite top 20 WrestleMania match, maybe even 2 of them, in Bret and Piper and Flair and Savage.
Well said, my friend. Well said.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you join us on the next episode as the real Dwayne Allen will give you his number 5 WrestleMania. What's your number 5? Come on.
My number 5 is... You'll find out in the next show.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you follow us on Twitter at Wrestling Realm. Make sure, if you haven't done yet, join the group page. I'm telling you, it gets heated in there.
Yeah.
We have some of the most heated discussions in the Wrestling Realm group page.
We are kings of controversy. I said it.
Most definitely. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you and good night.